Hello again, and let's touch upon the next practice SWE.2, which is software architectural design. This process name of SWE.2 is software architectural design. And what is the process purpose? The purpose of software architectural design is to establish an architectural design and identify which software requirements are to be allocated to which elements of the software. This sentence is very important, to identify which software requirements are allocated to which elements of the software. So allocating the requirement to the right software is the purpose of this particular step, and to evaluate the software architectural design against the defined criteria. Okay, now let me give one simple example. Everybody knows the meaning of architecture. Actually, I explained a similar example in the system also, but let me reiterate so that you can clearly understand. For example, when you design a house, you allocate gas stove to kitchen and sofa to the to the living room or drawing room, and your master bed to the bedroom. So likewise, you have to allocate the right requirement to the right software, right element of the software. That is called software architectural design, and that is the bird's eye definition of this particular process. Next comes the process outcomes. What are all the various process outcomes? As a result of this particular process, what are all the various outputs? The first output is a software architectural design is defined that identify elements of the software. First, you need to identify the elements of the software. This word is important. Identify the elements of the software. Next, the software requirements are allocated to elements of the software, allocating the right requirement to the right element of the software. This is the second important necessity of this particular process. Third is all the various interfaces. What are the various interfaces? Okay, how are each various types of elements interfacing with each other? Okay, that's the prominence of this step number 3. Next is step number 4. The dynamic behavior of resource consumption objectives of software elements are defined. The dynamic behavior and resource consumption objectives of software elements are required. So how are the various dynamic behavior? How is these elements behaving when the software is actually working? That is called dynamic behavior. And next comes the consistency and bidirectional traceability. They are established between software requirements and software architectural design. All right. So consistency and bidirectional traceability, I assume that I have already spent enough time on this importance of consistency and bidirectional traceability. Next comes the software architectural design is agreed and communicated to all the parties. Again, this communication and informing to all the stakeholders is of paramount importance. Now let's see all the base practices one after the other. All right. Now, just like in system engineering, here also it may appear slightly mundane, slightly repetitive, but each and every base practice is important in itself. Okay, please don't undermine any of it because it is repetitive. All right, let's see the base practice 1. Develop the software architectural design. Develop the document the software architectural design that specifies elements of the software with the respect of functional and non-functional software requirements. So you have to identify both the functional requirement and also the non-functional requirement, and then allocate it to the correct element. Next comes the allocate software requirements. Allocating the software requirements to the elements of the software architectural design. In the above base practice, we saw the functional and non-functional software requirements, but in the base practice 2, you allocate the entire software requirements to the elements of the software architectural design. Very subtle difference. You may think that these two are repetitive, but there is a subtle difference. Next comes the identify and develop the document the interfaces of each software element. All right. Now identifying and developing and documenting the interfaces of each software element. Now what is the interface for each and every element? With which other element is it interacting? So how is that interaction needed? Through what interface is needed? Identifying them is the role of base practice 3. Next comes the base practice 4, describing the dynamic behavior. Element and document, evaluate and document the timing and dynamic interaction of the software elements to meet the required behavior of the system. Okay. Now next comes the define resource consumption objectives. Determine and document the resource consumption objectives of all the relevant elements for software architectural design and appropriate hierarchical level. So understanding this hierarchical level, based on that hierarchical level, documenting the resource consumption for all the relevant elements is the responsibility of the base practice 5. Next comes the base practice 6. You have to, after identifying the software architecture, you have to keep in mind that you have to evaluate alternate software architectures. You have to evaluate. Now this is a slightly subjective step. Some tier 1s and tier 2s, they don't actually go through this particular step, but just to be on the safe side, but again, some tier 1s and tier 2s, they go through this step, but this step somehow, in my experience, is not mandatory. Now next comes the bidirectional traceability, establishing the bidirectional traceability between the software requirements, elements of the software requirements and the elements of the software architectural design. Next comes the consistency. Again, there should be consistency between the software requirements and software architectural design. Okay, and last but not the least, communicate agreed software architectural design. Communicate the agreed software architectural design and updates to software architectural design to all the relevant parties. This communication is of extreme importance. Okay, actually by now you would have understood that right from system engineering to SWE practices, right from SIS1 practice to SIS5 practice to SWE2 practice, last base practice is always communication. Alright, this is of highest importance, because if at all any stakeholder is not agreeing to the communication, agreeing to the requirements or the outlining traceability or consistency, then this has to be redone again. Next comes the output work products. What are all these output work products? Software architecture design, communication record, review record, traceability record, and interface requirement record. Okay, so at the end of these things, most important, the first one is software architectural design. Actually, because of lack of practice, in my experience, somehow these are not given much importance by okay, sorry, excuse me, but these are not given much importance, but just to maintain the record, if at all, if it is a SPICE 2 company or 3 company, all these records are meticulously maintained.